Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Generational Wrestling Podcast. As always, it's yours truly, the 28-year-old piece of gold of franchise, aka the showstopper, better known as the GOW's resident tribal chief. And with me, as always, I got my tag team partner, my brother, my family. He is the flyest in the room, Mr. 123. Pin that ass down, K Breezy, aka Tuco Kimber in the building, bro. How you doing?
Man, we've been talking about this all week. We've been telling the people, man, I'm excited. You excited, man? I am just pumped, man. Let's go. Let's do it.
All right, with no further ado, you may know this man as a WCW/WWE legend and Hall of Famer. He is one of the reasons we got the Attitude Era. Some would even say, man, for 83 straight weeks, he almost did it as he went head to head with the biggest conglomerate in the industry. Some would also say you can't say professional wrestling without mentioning his name. Speaking of 83 weeks, he is the host of the 83 Weeks podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, we bring to you Eric Bischoff. Brother, how you doing?
I'm so good I feel guilty.
Oh, that's awesome.
So before we got on the air, I asked where you're getting into, and you told me what you're getting into. You say you're in the middle of Wyoming, but I want to ask you about, your humble beginnings. I understand you grew up in Detroit, Michigan. So I want to know, how does a guy from Detroit, Michigan makes his way through the ranks of WCW, WWE, 1 point TNA, and now you live a life in Wyoming, man? What was life growing up for you, and did you envision yourself ever being in the industry?
No, I never imagined or aspired or fantasized even about being in the industry. I grew up as a wrestling fan. I grew up watching wrestling as a young kid in Detroit. I used to watch big time wrestling at EKLW out of Windsor, Canada. And, growing up as a kid, we lived in let's say a less than influential part of town, in Detroit back in the 50s and the 60s when I grew up there. Everything was the automotive industry, man. Every family worked either for Ford, Chrysler, General Motors. That's what everybody did. And everybody came from around the country to get those jobs because they were great paying jobs back in the day. So the entire, neighborhood that I lived in was people from all over the different parts of the country. It was a very diverse, neighborhood. You had, one block was the Polish families. The other block was, the African-American families. The other block was people that came from the South. They all kind of like found their own little niches of the neighborhood. And the result was, as a kid growing up, I was surrounded by culture. I was surrounded,
Right.
like my friends. It was especially cool in the summertime because there was a big Italian section too of our neighborhood. And when I say Italian section, I mean people that came over and didn't speak English, Italian section, and Polish and German and everything else. So you'd go, in the late summer and early fall, everybody had a garden. The Italian families especially, they were really well organized. Like one family would raise chickens. And believe me, the lots, that we all lived on, these were inner city lots, right? They were like 1/8 of an acre, barely big enough to park 4 cars on. But everybody had a garden. One family would grow tomatoes. The other family would grow zucchinis. The people down the street would raise chickens. People down the street from them would have 3 or 4 goats. Even though it was like in the city, it was cool. And in the summer, late summer, early fall, a lot of people would harvest the stuff that they grew. And then each of these families would have cookouts in the summertime. And everybody, in the neighborhood would you go from one place to the next place to the next place. So I had a blast growing up as a kid. It was just different, and I look back at it very fondly, and I'm grateful for it because it gave me a kind of a different worldview as a result. But I grew up, my parents, my father worked. We only had one car. My mother would drive my dad to work on Saturdays because he worked 6 days a week. And then my mom would take the car and she'd go grocery shopping, right, once a week. That left my younger brother and I home alone. Like we had control of the house. There was only one television and we had complete control of it, on Saturday mornings. So we'd start out watching, silly ass cartoons, Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner and Felix the Cat and all that happy horse shit. And then about 11 o'clock in the morning after the cartoons were over, as you got later in the morning, then wrestling came on. And that was like the big part of our Saturday mornings was watching wrestling. So I grew up as a fan, but I never, ever thought in my wildest dreams, even until the day I got a job in wrestling, I never thought I'd be in the wrestling business. So it kind of just happened.
That's awesome. Go ahead, man.
No, it's you. Go ahead.
Okay. So, okay, growing up in different cultures, growing up in a way that most people probably don't. Well, not most, but some don't. What was the inspiration for you to want to get into business? Was there something that you saw in entertainment or marketing that you said, "Man, this is something that I could do. This is the thing that I can put my hand on." What was that spark for you?
There really wasn't one when it came to being interested in the entertainment business. I was a consumer like everybody else, and I loved wrestling. I loved other forms of entertainment, like every kid does. Every person growing up, is affected in one way, shape, or form by music or television or movies or whatever it may be. Some people books. It doesn't matter. We're all affected by media in one way, shape, or form.
Right.
But I never thought I would be in it. Now, I think one of the reasons that I was probably drawn to the entertainment business is because I grew up as an entrepreneur. I didn't aspire to be an entrepreneur. I didn't think about the fact that I was. But, going back to my childhood, there was an Italian family, a couple. I don't know if they have any kids or if they had any kids or not, but they owned a little corner. It's still there, by the way. The store is still there. It's on Curtis Road, and I can't remember the cross street, but it's right in East Point or Roseville, where I grew up. And it was called Lucy's. That was the wife's name. They named the little store after Lucy. And they sold beer and soft drinks and convenience foods, and they had model cars for sale. I mean, it had a little bit of everything there, right? And I would go over there like when I was like 6 or 7 years old, and they gave me a job. And my job was to go out and pick up all the trash, all the litter, the candy wrappers, bottle caps, whatever was laying around. My job was to clean up the front of the store every day. And then once I was done, they would come out and they would check it. And if it looks like I did a good job, they would bring me in. And my pay for that day was I was able to reach into the cash register with one hand, not two, just one hand. And whatever coins I could grab with one attempt was my pay for the day.
Really?
And it was so freaking cool. I was like so proud of myself. And, I'd make like 45, 55, 75 cents a day. Well, back then, a candy bar was a nickel.
Right.
I could buy a really cool, model car that we'd put together. And that's what my friends did back then. And I could buy that for like 75 cents. So I was like buying my own shit when I was 7. And I didn't need an allowance from my parents or anything like that. So that inspired me. And from there, I got a paper route when I was like 10 or 11. I sold papers for the Detroit Free Press, and I had a little territory. And I, made money doing that. And in the wintertime, I would, shovel sidewalks for the, people in the neighborhood that couldn't shovel their own or just felt sorry enough for me that they'd pay me to do it. I would mow lawns in the summertime. I was just always, inspired to make money. So it just kind of built throughout my life. Those early times of my life kind of set the stage for me to look for ways to make money. And I think eventually I just kind of gravitated towards entertainment because that's a great way to make money.
So speaking of entertainment, you obviously are one of the most polarizing figures in the entertainment realm. But just talking to you right now, very laid back, very charismatic. One of the things I want to bring up is your TED Talk that I seen a while back.
Mm-hmm.
And you were talking about the ability to kind of turn the switch on and turn it off to make people feel as opposed to make people think. And
Right.
with you've done such a great job at doing both. You make people feel a certain way, but in order to make people feel a certain way, you have to think about how you're going to make said person feel some type of way. So when you look at the landscape of professional wrestling today, and the biggest thing you hear about is demos and creative and certain terms like that, where a couple years ago it really wasn't as popular now, but everybody seems to, you learn the phrase and you think you know what you're talking about. So for a guy that's actually been in the industry, how much of that word demo is really important. And as far as what do you think the problem is with a lot of characters nowadays who can't seem to get over, or they complain about creative? What would your advice be to those guys as somebody who made it from nothing and has completely flipped that switch?
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about, the discussion about demographics, in the wrestling media. And I find it really interesting because demographics and the 18 to 49 demo that everybody keeps talking about
Yes.
and comparing and analyzing in the wrestling internet community, it's not new. That measurement and the significance of that audience, that's one of the things that I did when I launched Nitro. Is I looked at the WWE, whose target audience at that time was teens and preteens. And you go back and you look at their show back before Nitro, particularly in the 80s, early 90s. That show was designed to sell ice cream bars and kids games and action figures and merchandise. It was targeted to teens and preteens. I knew when I launched Nitro, I couldn't compete with WWE in terms of trying to attract that audience. They were doing too great of a job, and they had been doing too great of a job for too long. I knew that the only way that I was going to be successful is to target an 18 to 49-year-old male demo. And by realizing that and committing to that, I knew that I had to change the nature of the product. It had to be appealing to an older audience. And there were a lot of reasons that, we saw manifest on television. We saw what happened, letting wrestlers use their own names, more adult themed, believable kind of reality-based storylines. All those were things that I did to attract that 18 to 49-year-old demo. So it's not new. What's new is that the wrestling internet community is talking about it and trying to analyze it and project their knowledge of the industry by really referencing things that are out there in the public domain. You can read Ad Week, you can read, Show Buzz Daily, you can read any of the trade, magazines or online things out there. And you can, figure out that, okay, 18 to 49-year-old male demos, or 18 to 49 people, male and female, is a very attractive audience for advertisers. That's still not fucking new. It's always been that way, folks.
Right.
But because I think, and this is just something I've really started noticing a lot over the last couple of weeks, I noticed it for longer, but I've really started thinking about it for the last few weeks. Because, for example, as soon as the AEW ratings came out yesterday, for example, one of the big AEW supporters who has his own, internet community, first thing he does comes out and says, "Oh, AEW beat Monday Night Raw in the 18 to 49-year-old demo." Well, first of all, Monday Night Raw was up against Monday Night Football, and AEW was up against nothing. Yeah. So right off the bat, it's kind of a comparison. But okay. So, but what does it mean? And it really doesn't mean much when you think about it in its entirety. Because WWE, for example, on Friday night delivered 850,000 people in that demo compared to what AEW did on Wednesday night.
Right.
So there's a tendency now to compare things that cast your favorite brand or your favorite show in the best possible light in comparison to the WWE. Okay, if you get off on that, have at it. It is a fraction of the overall equation. The overall equation is how many people are watching your show and buying tickets to your events,
right,
and buying your pay-per-views. What is your internet? How much revenue are you generating with your property? That's the real metric. That's a measurement that people should be thinking about and putting into context. But that doesn't cast AEW in a favorable light. It doesn't make it look like they're winning. It makes it look like they're competing and they're doing a great job, which they are, by the way. I'm not being critical.
Right.
of what's going on in AEW at all. I'm very supportive of them, and I'm very excited about their progress and all that. But I'm kind of realistic about shit too.
Right.
You know, AEW, you know, they're patting themselves on the back and, you know, cracking champagne in the locker room because they delivered 1.1 million viewers on Wednesday night. Well, WWE delivered 2.3 million last Friday night.
Yeah.
So in context, what does 1/10 of a percentage in a specific demo really mean?
Right.
It means you got clickbait. It means you can write something that people will check out. It means that people will talk about it. It creates this feeling that, oh, there's a war coming. Everybody wants the Monday Night War to be back so bad that they're kind of picking and choosing little elements of the business, of the wrestling business, to use as an example of their belief that it's actually happening. It's not. It's not. And until AEW goes head to head in a real battle and actually takes market share, takes audience from WWE and moves it over to AEW's, you know, column, until that happens, it's like me talking shit, you know, about Conor McGregor.
Right.
You know, hey, I used to be in martial arts. You know, I used to be a Golden Gloves boxer. I wrestled in high school. I wrestled in college. I was a bouncer in a bar. You know, back in the day, I was kind of a badass. It doesn't mean I'm on the same level as Conor McGregor. So for me to talk shit, you know, from the sidelines,
Right.
doesn't really mean much. And I think people talking shit in comparison to WWE right now, in picking and choosing little elements and using that as your kind of basis for comparison, is a lot like me picking a fight with a legitimate, you know, badass, you know, from the comfort of my home here in Cody, Wyoming. No, I'm never really going to have to compete and prove anything.
Well, go ahead, Tuco.
Well, you touched on something, you know, as far as, you know, people's perception of, you know, the ratings and how much of a factor, you know, that demographic is. Does the process of looking at Raw, when you look at Monday Night Raw, and people biggest complaint is that, you know, they don't seem to push the talent that people want to see more. They seem to kind of do the same type of matches day in and day out. Do you see that as I don't want to say, do you see that as being a big factor to people making that suggestion of the 18 to 49? It's just that people are tired of watching the same thing. So when they gloat about it, that AEW is doing this and AEW is doing that, but we all feel that AEW still needs to grow. We you know, it still has years before it gets to where I think it needs to really compete with Raw. I prefer they stay on Wednesdays. I don't want to see them compete on Monday night with Raw, because Wednesday seems to be a perfect day for them. That seems to be different from everyone else. So do you think that contributes a little bit, is the people's down perception on Monday Night Raw to why the rating is so important?
No, I do, Tucola, and that's a really good observation. By the way, I agree with you 100%. I think I'm not suggesting AEW should compete.
Right.
You know, head to head, I think that would be a bad decision for AEW in the long term. I think they've got their home on Wednesday nights. They should own that. They should expand that and own it, right? But again, I think the criticism of the WWE product, and I've been critical of it for years in some respects. I'm very supportive of it in others.
Right.
You kind of have to look at it a little differently, though. You know, WWE has done a phenomenal job building itself into a global brand.
Most definitely.
WWE, there are more people in India watching Monday Night Raw than there are watching it in the United States.
Yeah.
True.
And there are more people watching Monday Night Raw, or I don't know about SmackDown because I don't follow that, but there are more people watching Monday Night Raw internationally than watch it here in the United States. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. I don't have the data to back it up, but I'm just kind of common sense suggests I'm right. By virtue of the number of people watching it in India, I know I'm right. Right? So there are more people watching internationally than watching here domestically. Well, the reason that WWE has been able to achieve that level of success, and the reason they're making so much money internationally, the reason that the network, which is now the Pica, well, there's still WWE Network internationally. The reason that WWE Network is so successful is because it's acceptable internationally. People don't realize this. Now, again, I haven't done business internationally in television for a long, long time. So my knowledge and my perceptions may be dated. No, they're not maybe, they are dated. But I think they're probably still true to a large degree. Back when, WCW was really growing and emerging as a legitimate competitor to WWE, one of the things that we really weren't able to compete with was the international footprint. And the reason we couldn't is because WCW at that time was considered to be more violent. It was more over the top than WWE was back in the day. WWE was safer for a younger audience because they produced their show for a younger audience. While I was producing my show for the 18 to 49-year-old domestic U.S. audience, which I did very well and successfully and outperformed the WWE, our shows were really tough to distribute internationally because in Europe, for example, in the UK, in Germany, France, the big markets, international TV markets at the time were the UK and Germany. Well, in Germany, for example, so much of the stuff that we did that was acceptable here in the United States in terms of violence and action were completely unacceptable in Europe. They would get edited out because we were producing our show for an older audience, not a younger audience, but the standards of the broadcast standards and what was acceptable in the UK and Germany was a much, much, much more child, teen and preteen type of presentation. You couldn't have the level of violence that we did, or intensity, we'll call. We couldn't have that in Europe. So WWE is producing a global product. AEW is producing a domestic US product.
That makes sense.
And as a result, the WWE product feels a little sterile. There is a sameness to it. There is a softness to it. The action is great. The characters are colorful. The production is outstanding, but it doesn't have the same edge that AEW has because AEW isn't right now, at least, trying to compete internationally. When that day comes and AEW is trying to get distribution in the UK, major distribution, not on some little niche cable outlet that nobody cares about, but major, distribution internationally, they're going to most likely, if the standards are kind of the same, run up against some of the same problems we had. Then you have to make a decision. Am I producing a global product that I can make money with all over the world? Or am I producing a domestic US product for a domestic US 18 to 49-year-old demo? You can't do both. In Europe, in Germany in particular, I remember when I was in high school, I was a foreign student exchange student. And I went over to Germany for a portion of my senior year. And I lived with a German family that didn't speak English, kind of in the farm country of southern Germany in Bavaria in the Black Forest, right? Beautiful, beautiful part of the world, by the way. And one of the things coming as a kid, as a teenager coming from the United States, I'm living with this German family and I'm watching TV with them. The whole idea of being a foreign exchange student is you get immersed in the culture and, you learn much differently living with a German family that doesn't speak English than you do reading about shit in a book, right?
Right.
So, I lived in their home with them and, watched television with them at night, things that everybody else would do if you actually lived there. And I'm watching TV with them one night and a commercial comes on and there's this, gorgeous woman in the shower completely naked, washing her breasts and it was a soap commercial. I'm thinking, I'm moving here. This is awesome. I like it here. I speak a little bit of German. I like the beer and there's like hot naked chicks on TV. This is a great place to live.
Right.
Why not?
But in the US, now let me before I finish that thought. So in Germany, full frontal nudity in a television commercial is completely acceptable. Nobody thinks twice about that. It's as natural as a commercial with two people sitting at a desk talking about soap, right? But in the US, back then at least, on network television, a network would lose their FCC license over something like that. They'd be fined millions of dollars. There would be an uproar. People would be burning buildings down as a result of that. Because in the US, we look at, nudity and things like that much differently than they do in Europe.
Right.
Conversely, in Europe, at least when I was doing, producing television, nudity was fine, tasteful. Yeah, great. No big deal. Nothing's rated R or anything like that, unless it's graphic. But violence, somebody hitting somebody else on the head with a chair. Oh my God, you get pulled off the chair in a minute for that. So it's the way the two cultures kind of treat different things, right?
Right.
And I have to kind of step back and remind myself that WWE is a global product.
Yeah.
Right.
Other products here in the US, whether it's Ring of Honor, or Impact, or AEW, are for the most part domestic US products. And they can get away and do things that WWE can't get away with and do if they want to maintain that kind of global relationship. So you got to just kind of remember they're two different products. But there is a sameness. I've always been critical of that. I've said often that there's like this giant WWE cookie cutter, and they throw all kinds of different dough in the cookie maker, different colors, different flavors, different textures, different smells, all that. And they put it in the cookie maker, and it runs through the cookie cutter. When it comes out as a cookie, it all kind of looks the same and feels the same and tastes the same and smells the same.
Yeah.
It's so homogenized and sanitized through the WWE creative process that there's a sameness to it. It's like when you go and you get, you're really craving a potato chip. Not that I ever get the munchies much, but it's like when you really do, and you want a really good barbecued flavor potato chip, and then you go and you buy a bag and you get it, and it tastes the same as a sour cream and onion potato chip.
Yeah, right.
Well, that kind of pisses you off a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And there's the same kind of feeling about WWE product because it's all so homogenized for that global audience. Whereas AEW feels very distinctive and unique because they can be.
I want to ask you a question. One more WWE. Then I want to kind of switch over to some more WCW Impact and then some other things. But as far as WWE, the most recent news was, of course, the rebranding of NXT. Now, for a lot of the hardcore fans who missed the old WCW and the Attitude Era style of wrestling on the WWE side, NXT was the closest thing we've gotten to straightforward wrestling as far as WWE is concerned. Because like you say, WWE is such a global brand. It's more about the entertainment, it feels at times, as opposed to the physical in-ring product. What do you think about people making such a big deal of the rebranding of NXT? Because like you said, the main roster, SmackDown and Raw, they have a certain feel to it, but NXT kind of brought that independent, that kind of grunge underground feel with a little bit of a mainstream polish. So do you think NXT is going to also head into that global rebrand as Raw and SmackDown have already been?
Kind of looks that way, doesn't it? I mean, I saw the set design. It was posted online before the show actually aired. And look, WWE does live action television production better than any production company on the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, they just do. Kevin Dunn is the Rembrandt of television production. And that's a fantastic thing in many respects. But again, it's, in my opinion, overproduced because I think people that watch wrestling, and I believe this when I launched Nitro, it's one of the reasons why I went live, is because there's a certain, it's almost subconscious when you're watching really good live television.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, you know that, anything can happen because this is fucking live.
Right.
Bad shit sometimes happens on live TV. And And that's what makes it fun to watch, right? But when the show is overproduced to the point where it looks like you're watching a movie,
Yeah.
you lose that connection. You no longer feel like you're sitting up there in the rafters watching a live show. You feel like you're sitting in a movie theater watching a movie about wrestling.
Yeah.
And it changes the way you relate to it. It's the difference between listening to a live concert at home on television and being there. When you're there, you get a different feel than you do when you're sitting at home. Same music, same artist, same staging, same everything, but you're not as connected to it.
Right.
And I think because WWE tends to produce their stuff so fucking well that it distances itself from the audience. Whereas when you look at AEW, there's still that kind of, I mean, it's great television production. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being critical of it. I think it's better production, in my opinion, for the wrestling fan than WWE, because you kind of feel like you're there. That's the whole idea, is to, in my opinion, at least, is to produce a show that allows the person sitting at home on their couch, eating a piece of pizza, drinking a beer, to feel like they're actually in the arena. And a little bit of grit goes a long way, as opposed to polish.
Yeah.
And I think what I'm seeing thus far, we don't know yet, because it's the new, NXT 2.0 is new at this point. But I think NXT 2.0 is having an identity crisis. I think deep down inside, there are a lot of people that know, hey, we just need to go back and be a little gritty.
Yep.
And we just kind of it needs to have an edge. It can't be so pretty. It can't be so WWE in order for it to have its own identity. It needs to be different than the Raw SmackDown product. What I'm seeing so far is a tendency to lean into the Raw and SmackDown product in terms of its presentation, which if I'm right, and I could be wrong, I hope I am, but if I'm right, it'll further distance the audience away from NXT because they want something different. They don't want a lesser version of Raw or a smaller version of SmackDown. They want something that's unique. And until NXT 2.0 or otherwise, or 3.0 or 4.0 creates that unique relationship with the audience by being a little different,
right?
I think they're swimming upstream.
Do you think there was an overreaction to what was going on between NXT and AEW when they were competing on the same night? Some people, as you say, dubbed it the Wednesday night wars that were going on between them. Do you feel that well, of course, obviously it was a contribution, but do you feel it was a major contribution to the new change in NXT?
I mean, I don't know. The honest answer is I don't know. I think, because you kind of asked two questions there, so let me tackle the first one. Do I think the reference to the Monday or the Wednesday Night Wars and people's reaction to it was overstated? Kind of, sort of. Going back to the same example I used, let's say I, got into a confrontation with, I got into a fist fight with one of Mike Tyson's young kids back in the day.
Okay.
And I came out on top of that. Well, I didn't beat up Mike Tyson. I beat up this 12-year-old kid.
Right.
It ain't the same thing.
Right.
Okay.
And when you look at the Wednesday night, competition, we'll call it, AEW throwing their best shit on television with their A-list talent.
Right.
The biggest stars. NXT was the training environment. It was not the, you didn't see the top WWE stars on Wednesday night against the top AEW stars.
True.
You saw the developmental stars in AEW that hadn't even been on Raw or SmackDown yet for the most part, competing against the very best of AEW. So it was a little bit like me beating up Mike Tyson's kid and walking around telling everybody I kicked Tyson's ass. Well, kind of, but not really.
Right. All right, I got a couple fan questions I want to get into really quick before we move forward. So we got Marco says, "Do you miss WCW?"
Oh, listen, I miss aspects of it. You know, it was an important part of my life. It was an amazing time of my life. Achieved a lot of pretty cool shit. Um, I'm still making a living off of it. So there's aspects of it I really do miss. I miss the creative process. I love, when I think every once in a while, Conrad and I go back and, we just went back to 1996, an episode in September of 1996 when X-Pac showed up for the very first time. And, Sting, turned into the Crow and all that cool shit that was going on. I mean, the energy, we were feeling so good because we went from being, the little runt that showed up at the picnic, that nobody wanted to be there compared to WWE, to being like the guys cooking the cool food and everybody wanted to come and hang out with us, right? Because we had the best barbecue at the picnic. And to go from being laughed at and being ridiculed as a wrestling company and most people never believed we would ever be even close to being competitive with WWE. And then within a short period of time, being able to turn that all around, the morale was so good. The feeling was so good. I miss that, but there's a lot of it I don't miss. In reality, if I could transport myself back in time, I wouldn't, because there was a flip side to that coin too.
Right.
And I think human nature, at least my nature, is to always remember the good shit, and you kind of forget about the bad shit, or I choose to.
Right.
So I don't. If I think about the bad shit, I could talk myself out of going back in time real fast.
And we have another one from a fan named Joe. He says, "How hands-on are you or were you with Buffalo Bill Cody beer? And if you could have a beer with any wrestler, dead or alive, besides Stone Cold Steve Austin, who would it be?"
Well, I was very hands-on. My wife and I actually worked on that project together. I created the logo and, went through the trademark process. I found a brewer to actually brew the beer for us. I didn't brew it in my basement or anything like that. We actually had a legitimate brewer brew our beer and package it for us. I was hands-on in that. I developed the flavor profile with the brewer. I mean, I didn't know how to do it. I just knew what I liked and what I didn't like.
Right.
The kind of beer that I wanted. And I worked very closely with the brewer to kind of achieve that. So I was very hands-on with it. And lost a shit ton full of money in the process. But it's a downside of being an entrepreneur, right? You get really excited about something, you throw your heart into it, you spend all your money thinking you're sure it's going to work, and then it doesn't. Welcome to the life of an entrepreneur.
Yes, sir.
But was very hands-on. Now, as far as another wrestler, I think I've learned the hard way that, character-based beer brands are, while they're a fun idea, are not necessarily a great idea.
Gotcha.
So I would stay away from it. I guess if I was going to do one, I'd do one with Andre the Giant. I'd make the biggest bottle of beer available. Like 3 quarts of beer in one bottle.
Whew.
I would do that. If I was going to do one, that's what I would do, because I think that's the only one that would stand a chance of living for more than a year or two.
Now, I got another question for you, and I'm gonna pass to my partner here. How necessary do you think? Let me rephrase it. You hear a lot about backstage politics in professional wrestling. Do you think that is a necessary evil that is needed, regardless of how you look at it, good or bad? Do you think that is something that you need in terms of being a professional wrestler, trying to get your shit in, and trying to get over, trying to maintain the integrity of your character?
I don't think it's necessary, but I think it's human nature, and I think it's going to exist no matter what. I think the key is, perhaps, I guess, I've never been asked that question, but it's a great question. Perhaps rather than determining whether it's necessary or not, meaning do you cultivate it or do you try to kill it? I think the better approach is to recognize it for what it is and try to manage it. I think any talent in any form of entertainment or sport or even business, everybody wants to try to move ahead. everybody wants to try to achieve something bigger. Not everybody, but most people, and especially in the entertainment business. People that are drawn to entertainment aspire to be the best at what they do for the most part. And that part of our nature as human beings is going to mean that there's always going to be politics. Now, it can either work for you and you can have a healthy, competitive / political environment where everybody's trying to get ahead of everybody else, or it can be cancerous if you don't manage it. So I think acknowledging it and managing it the right way brings out the best in some people. Some people it doesn't. Some people will fall by the wayside, but those people were never cut out to be at the top of the list anyway. If you're going to be, you know, I'll use Nicki Minaj, not that I'm, you know, a rap aficionado, but you don't become as successful as Nicki Minaj was as a battle rapper because you got thin skin.
Yeah.
You take a lot of shit, you fight, you know, there are politics, and you emerge or you don't.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we call it politics, but the competitive nature of performers should be a healthy thing. And you should accept that if you're a performer, you may not be in that upper 5%. You may be in the lower 95%. You know, 5% of the people make 80% of the money in the entertainment business. And I don't care if it's music or television or movies or whatever it is. That formula always seems to apply, right? You may not be in that top 5%, but it doesn't mean that you don't have a great career if you're in the bottom 95%.
Right.
You can have a fantastic career. There are people that have had amazing, financially successful and critically rewarding careers who were mid-card, you know, wrestlers or mid-card musicians or mid-card actors. You know, it's okay. Not everybody's going to be number one, but I think that competitive, call it political too, that environment is always going to exist. It's whether it exists in a healthy way or whether it exists in a destructive way.
You got it. Too cold.
We had wrestler TJP on, and he was explaining the business side to what it is, the process to promoting a wrestler. And as someone who, former executive producer, senior VP, president, someone who knows that backstage, how it works, what is the fan missing when we look at a talent and we say, oh man, why aren't they pushing this person? This guy's this guy's that. Why? Or, okay, let me put it better. When people complain about Vince not pushing someone that isn't that's someone that they feel should be higher than where they are, you know, you can say a Ricochet or any younger talent that you see. What is the business side that fans are missing to their argument that they don't understand? Because you know, as fans, we want to see guys grow. We want to see guys get opportunity, and we see some guys don't get it. What is it that the fans are really missing?
That's a really, really great question and observation. A couple things, and I'm not going to name names here because I don't do that.
Right.
But you look at any high-profile WWE talent that has recently left, okay? We know what we see on television. Well, the reason that talent has been on television and the reason we have a relationship with that talent and we want to see that talent succeed and grow is because that talent's been out there for a long time and has been achieving certain things and making us happy and satisfying us as viewers. And we want to see more of it because we really love that talent, whoever he or she may be.
Right.
But what we don't see behind the scenes is what's going on in that talent's life. What other challenges are going on behind the scenes that we as fans know nothing about?
Right.
Nothing about. What difficulties are we having with that talent in terms of trying to take it to the next level? Because it's one thing to come out and be successful at a certain level,
Mhm.
and then the audience gets excited. And the audience expects that because we're excited about this level, that automatically, by default, at some point in time, that talent's going to go to the next level.
Yeah.
A lot of that's up to the talent, and there may be something missing.
Okay.
I've seen talent in the past that people, including myself, were so excited about at a certain level, but because a talent either didn't have the confidence, or more often than not, it wasn't confidence. More often than not, it was just that ability to expand that character, to grow as a character. Sometimes talent gets very comfortable at a certain level. They really know that character. They're very confident in that character. They know how to get the audience to react to that character. But when it's time to move up, you need to move up your game. And try to imagine, like, and again, I'm not an actor. Don't try to pretend I am one, but I often use movies and television as an example because I think it's a great example. You can be a great co-star. You can have all the tools that make you a great supporting actor or actress, but you don't have that magic that allows you to become The Rock.
Right.
You can be a co-star to The Rock, but you'll never be The Rock. And that's the same thing in wrestling.
Yeah.
There's something magic that and intangible that a talent has to have to go to the next level. It's not just a push. It's not just putting them out there any more than it is taking an actor that's a good supporting cast member and throwing them out there in a major $200 million action flick and then going, why didn't that work? Well,
yeah,
because that actor isn't The Rock. And the same is true in wrestling. And it's frustrating because as viewers, we don't know that. We don't see what talent doesn't have or can't seem to achieve, or what other personal challenges are going on in that talent's life that's preventing that talent from achieving it. We don't see or hear about any of that. We only see what we see on TV.
All right, Eric. Well, I know we want to be respectful of your time here. So one final question, and we're out the door here. You, being a guy who went head to head with WWE 83 straight weeks, speaking of talent, pushing talent, and what a star level, a B+ player or A+ player would be for you in this day and age, what would you look for in a top talent if you were running a promotion?
I mean, there's some great talent out there right now. I mean, we're seeing it in AEW. You know, to me, Daniel Bryan, you know, CM Punk, although we haven't really seen CM Punk in action in about 7 years, but I suspect, you know, he's quite capable. He's a real relatable, identifiable character.
Yeah.
Much more, you know, Randy Orton to me is a real relatable identity. You know, Randy Orton is one of my favorite characters in wrestling to this day in any organization. Because he's still, even though he's kind of surrounded with, you know, I'll call them, you know, kind of comic book type characters.
Right.
That's not disparaging. That's not has anything to do with the talent because that's what the company is asking them to be. But Randy Orton has still been able to kind of maintain his dignity and all that, and he's still kind of real and believable. But you know, CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, you know, Chris Jericho still has it. I would look for talent that the audience that I'm building my show for relates to in an honest way, in an authentic way, and can deliver a promo, man. If you can't talk, you can't be that star. I don't care what you can do in the fucking ring.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're inventing shit that nobody's even fantasized about, and you can do it each and every week. If you can't grab the mic and make me believe, you're just a spectacle. It's
Absolutely.
like watching college gymnastics. It's cool as shit.
Right.
What it is. But, you know.
Oh, my God. Well, Eric, I want to say on behalf of my partner now, GLW Media, Generation Wrestling Podcast, we appreciate you taking the time out to hang out with us. And before we get off the air here, what are your social medias? Are there any websites, any plugs? I know you got the podcast. Please feel free to plug it in.
Thank you, man. 83 weeks, wherever you get your favorite podcast. I love doing it. You can find me over on YouTube, 83 weeks on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at Bischof. And that's all I got. I got nothing to plug, brother. Nothing going on here.
I got you. I got
I got to get something going on. I got nothing to plug. Shit.
No, trust me. You've done so much. Trust me, people want to listen to you. So you're someone who knowledgeable of the business of many businesses, and folks definitely would love to hear from you. So you got a lot going on.
All right, okay, I feel better. Hey, guys, anytime you want to do this, you know how to reach me. Let me know. You guys are great. I love doing it. I had fun. Thank you very much for the invite.
Well, thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, as always, it's yours truly, the 28-year-old piece of gold. He's too cold. He's WWE/WCW Legend Hall of Famer Eric Bischoff, and that's the bottom line because the franchise says so.